This is the 1 hour capsule.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it.
Hello, and on this third episode of the 1 hour podcast, I've invited my good friend Ryan Coelho. Ryan Coelho is an interesting person. Number one, he's one of my closest friends. And since I wanted to have a podcast, I thought about him just because outside of podcasting, we already had so many hours of interesting, deep philosophical, existential conversations. And he and I, we clicked at a different level. So, and I think that's why one of the reasons why we get caught up by these thoughts about how we look at the world, how we interpret each other and relationships. And so, so I'm very happy to have him here, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello. Well, as you have heard from the introduction, we have our guest today, Ryan Coelho, and co-host Tierno Diouf here.
Hello. Hey, everybody.
So I'm gonna start by saying that since I wanted to start the podcast, I've had a list down of people that I wanted to interview, I wanted to have on the podcast that I wanted to do, which is this podcast. And the name that I have put down originally in my list, and this is like dating back like 2 to 3 years, has been Ryan Coelho. So because Ryan Coelho is like a
Yay.
friend, is a friend, and we've been talking, and every time we get into sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, but quite a few times, we tend to get into very deep topics. I don't know. It tends to be like in the spiritual side of things. Wouldn't you say, Ryan?
Yeah, spiritual, philosophy, psychology, that kind of world.
Yeah, I think generally it's just relations with people, right? Just like how do we deal with people and how do we deal with situations that come to life? And
Yeah.
I think because I was telling Tiana earlier and before we hit record on the podcast, because I want to tell this story. I think it's very interesting, like just how we met. And it just tells the story as like it's just you really just don't know people. Like when you meet them shortly, you don't meet people, uh, and so um, you don't see sometimes sort of the potential for what a person should be or what a person could be in your life. And so the example of that is that when I met Ryan, it was at a gathering of friends, and I actually I didn't know I was gonna be friends with Ryan when I met him, and it just happened. It just
Trying to
happened that
remember that
way.
gathering.
Yeah, but we remember there was a gathering. I don't say names, but there was this Turkish girl who was friends with the former girlfriend at the time.
But you guys came over
Uh,
for dinner. I think that's what it was.
yeah, exactly. And so I remember you were on the laptop and you were browsing to some music, and I was trying to tell Tierno what is that music that you were collecting some kind of world music, um, sort of like uh, you were
Folklore.
playing for the party. Yeah, you were playing that kind of music, and I was like, oh, this guy knows like kind of some of the kind of same kind of world music that I would be interested in. So I was like, okay. Do you know what that is, Ryan? You know what that was that you were looking at?
Oh my
I forget.
gosh. I'm trying to remember the party.
All right, so that so I was trying to remember like what is the music that you were that, but that I don't think it really matters. It's just
Well,
funny.
what was interesting, Norman, is I had recently got back from Ghana,
Yes.
from an international, or from a volunteer stint in Ghana, West
Mhm.
Africa, with Engineers Without Borders. So it could have been Ghanaian music because at that time, someone I was dating, I had met in Ghana, and I think it was the dinner, whatever it was, the party. Um,
Yeah.
I know all of us there appreciated music, and I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
when I look at our relationship, how it's developed, that's something that's always been consistent for us. Is sort of talking about music, sharing music. Like that's always been like I think the one thread, no matter where we've
That's
gone
true.
throughout the years.
That's true.
So it's funny that it started off on that note, no pun intended.
Yeah, because I yeah, it's true. Just because I noticed that, and then I thought like, oh, okay, this guy. So it was always in my mind that you were an interesting person,
Oh, thank
and I
you.
was like, yeah. And then I don't know how soon after that we started to see each other on the street like quite a few times for a period of I don't know how many weeks. And then at one point I just came to you and I told you like, hey, we've seen each other like 4 or 5 times by now. I think we like the universe wants us to just sit down and talk. Should we just like schedule a lunch or something? And then that's what we did, right?
Yeah, I
We
think
had that
we had
lunch.
beers, and like you actually helped me because I was fairly early on in my business at that time.
Yeah,
And you helped me get a presentation opportunity at a conference through your work. So it was great. You know, I got a chance to share something that was really meaningful and important to me with a
yeah,
great audience in Ottawa, I believe it was. So
yeah.
that was a lot
That's
of fun.
true. But the start of like the deep conversations, and I just go back to that meeting where we had because I remember it was like still 2011, and then it's a lot of people who were thinking about 2012 and what's gonna happen in the Mayan calendar,
Oh yeah,
and I remember like our conversation was like, what do we think about that?
I can't
and
remember what we
and
said. It would be fun to like. I kind of wish that all conversations are recorded, even just for the two
yeah,
people, to go
yeah.
back and like listen to. It'd be very interesting to see where we were in those
But
conversations.
yeah, but we did, as friends do, share a lot of personal stuff as well, and
Right.
then that happens. And then it's just I always find it interesting how we talk about the personal stuff, but then we like unpack it in a way that brings so much content and meaning out of that experience. And then we just like, I don't know, I have this sense that there's just different kinds of connections that you have with different people that I don't know what it is. It's like sort of like some people enable other people,
Hmm.
and it just allows for certain things to come out in a way that other people don't enable it to do. And I don't know
Mm.
what it is exactly, but I feel that this is like an energetical invisible force that just sort of like either enables people or disables people, because I also feel the opposite happens. I don't know if you
I
notice that.
wonder if it's also like a comfort level. Once you get to know someone, you kind of feel confident that you could open up a bit about a specific subject or any
Yes,
debate because you're not scared of, losing a friend. You're not scared of, I don't know, just ruining your relationship per se.
for sure that happens, for sure that happens. But what I'm getting at is that I feel that there is some predisposition that you have with certain people
Hmm.
that you don't even know them yet as much, but yet you do feel something. I don't know if it's like compatibility. I don't know what it is, but it's just. I mean, I've seen it, and I'm just talking about like me and Ryan, but I'm also talking about like
Well, so a word you
relate.
said that was really interesting was the word unpack. I like
Mm,
enabling and disabling. I think that that kind of connects with it. But I find with people, certain people, you either unpack and grow from that conversation, or you don't do anything. Like it's just surface level. You're not unpacking anything. Or you, if worse, you create more baggage that ends up being
yeah,
wrapped up because things aren't shared authentically, or you're not willing to budge on any beliefs. So I find with us, we tend to always move in a direction of unpacking, and that I think is part of our natural disposition, or at least our growth over the years where we've kind of headed, is going deeper rather than pushing things to the side and just assuming that's the right
yeah,
way to think about it, right?
yeah. I guess for me, it's like I really want to become aware of as much things as I can,
Right.
and I'm not so sure whether it's always a great thing, because I also like I feel like there are certain things that maybe you don't want to be aware about, but for the most part, I want to be aware about it as much as possible.
So when you say aware, though, what do you mean by that? What do
Like
you
I
mean
want to
by the
be,
word?
I want to be aware of like my feelings. I want to be aware of other people's feelings, intentions. I want to have that awareness. I don't want to be caught up in like automatic, robotic, sort of like line of thinking or acting that just makes me do things that probably I could regret life afterwards.
Right. And how about when it comes to like issues that's going on around the world? Do you want to be aware about all those?
Not so
Or
much. I want to have a general understanding, and I think I like at the general level, I have a very general understanding that actually supports my understanding of the smaller events, because I can understand like like I don't know, like for example, like other people, like my dad, for example, he likes politics and he views the world from the lenses of his political views,
Mm.
and that's okay, and I respect them. But when it comes to me, I look at things not from the political view, but I like to look at politics from the point of view that I have like a sort of like an understanding of motivations of why countries or leaders or powers do actions, and then from that lens, I am able to understand like, okay, why are they doing what they're doing right now? Um, and so that I could apply to everything. And
Right, that almost that deeper awareness kind of encompasses the
mhm,
general awareness of what's going on, right? When you
yeah,
start to ask
but
some of the
reflection is very important, right?
right,
Because like just to give an example, just to be very concrete, like if I have like an argument with someone that's close to me, um I want to have that argument, but I also want to understand why that happened. Like I don't want to just say sorry if it's my mistake, right?
right.
If I made a mistake, I don't want to just say sorry and then move on and then just go with that. But I really want to understand why it happened, like what drove that interaction to be negative and to become a conflict. And I want to understand that. And if I don't have the understanding, then I'm gonna ask the other party to help me understand it.
And where does the understanding lead for you?
I guess I guess it is because I have the sense that I really want to do everything that I can, what's in my power, to make life as pleasant as it can possibly be within the grounds of my control.
Mm,
And that's what I'm at. Like if there is a way, because I can't control everything, right? Like if a loved one passes away, for example, I can't control that. So there's nothing I can do about that. But if it's there are other areas in life like relationships, understanding between two people, and if there is something in there that I can do to control it. So I learn something, let's say a conflict, and I learn from it. And then if I reach the point where that conflict will arise because of that similar set of events, then my reflection, my past understanding and reflection will, I think, help me at the very least lessen the new one because it's very similar because I learned it before,
mm.
and that's what I'm getting at with that.
Right.
Uh,
It helps you approach situations. Would you, in what kind of way would you say, like a better way or more mature
well,
way?
like if I can reach reflection understanding, then if I come across a similar event of negativity or conflict, then my reflection will help me understand the motivations of the reasons
Right.
why it happened, and then I will be able to then address it that way, or at least because I became aware of it. And most of the time, I become aware of it because of me. If it's a relationship, the other person also becomes aware of something that I'm really passionate to become aware of, and then I share that so that I become aware of, but also the other person becomes aware of,
Right.
and then I communicate that. I like for example, like I could have a very bad couple of weeks or days, because things in life happen that way. Life can bring you bad times sometimes, and you can get at a very low point. And so I can be at that point, but then I can explain to the other person, I'm feeling a little down and I'm not myself. And even like let's say my text messages can be a little bit like dull and lacking emotion, but it's not because of anything. It's just because I'm going through this right now, and so I don't want you to understand it in any other way. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm not myself, and that's what I mean. If I know I'm not myself, and that affects another relationship, then I can communicate that. That person doesn't need to interpret that I am being one way because I'm just being a jerk, but I'm being one way because something is affecting me and it's taking me out of my element, that I'm not being myself. And so hopefully that person will interpret it that way and not in any other way.
Yeah. And I find that happens a lot when we're unaware of emotions.
Hmm.
And, when we're young, we're never actually taught how to deal with emotions. If anything, we're taught how to suppress it, ignore it. We get advice to just move on or deal with it. Like we aren't properly coached through emotions. And really, it's just chaotic energy entering our system, and we're forced to learn to deal with it and cope with it. And I find for many years, until we sort of build our own self-awareness and get to the point of self-realization, I think we just create these systems that are just automatic in dealing with them. And I've personally found, because that's been coming up a lot for me, with certain relationships, and it's amazing because the person that they're coming up with, we can have some really good conversations around um, the self-reflection about, why do I fall into that pattern, and just do those things. And it's amazing when you just, even just that act of becoming aware of the fact that something's a pattern, or you have a belief that hasn't been fully reflected on
Mm.
or explored. It's amazing how much power you get over that emotion, and to an extent you start to detach yourself from that emotion so that it doesn't run you. Instead, when it shows up, it simply cues you or guides you into a certain process that's much more, I want to say rational, but not rational in the sense where you get rid of the emotion. It's rational in the sense where you work with the emotion and start to deal with things in ways that can resonate emotionally with yourself and other people, but also not create conflict or misunderstandings and chaos, really.
But I wonder if improving improving your emotional intelligence is also part of unlearning some of the habits you have or some of the reaction that you have. Like, is that the process? Is that where the process starts? You unlearn certain things, then you can start improving your emotional intelligence. Because I feel like, personally, I don't think I have the highest emotional intelligence, but I'm not sure where I can pinpoint certain things in my life to be able to start, becoming better at noticing certain things. I don't know.
That's a really interesting observation. I've never
Yeah.
thought of it that way. So you're saying first to unlearn, when you say certain things, what would that look like? Unlearning.
Uh, like certain behavior or action or reaction that I have to certain thing that happened to me. So let's say, like someone know how to push my buttons, and I know for a fact they're doing it on purpose. So how do I unlearn that I should not react to those things, and then how do I get to a certain level where I'm like, hey, this is okay. I don't need to react to everything. I don't know. That might not be like a specific example, but
No, yeah, it's because what's coming to mind is, I think, something that, so I've, just to give some context, I've
mhm,
been playing around in the personal development game for since 2011, 2012, and sort of wrote books, coached, did speaking, and I went through a lot of philosophies that were, I don't want to say incorrect, but it was amazing to see how much the philosophy has evolved over time.
mhm.
And the thing that kind of catches me based on what you said is, I find there's a point where it's really hard to be aware of emotions, especially when they occur. So I think for a long time we look back, and that looking back may be that sort of unlearning process of when you start to be like, oh, I see that learned behavior and I want to start changing it. So
Mm.
I almost feel like it's that awareness of the
Yep.
learned behavior and getting to an unlearn. But the actual unlearn process I found much more interesting, because in order to unlearn, really what you need to do is give yourself something else to learn. You need to,
Ah.
in other words, relearn, right? Because when you unlearn, where does your mind go? It doesn't know where to go. It needs a frame of reference in
Mhm.
order to support a worldview. And so what's interesting there, though, is the relearning doesn't happen on your time. It's kind of like one of those things that are out of your control, because you might not have all the experiences or information to come up with the proper new thing to learn, right? It's kind of like you're sitting by this fire and you know that it's burning you, and you really want to move to a better fire that doesn't burn you, but you don't know how to put that fire together. Like it's just
I
like,
see. Yep.
I don't know what the
Great
data
example.
is to do that. And so it's amazing how, to an extent, I think we have more control than we do over our personal development process. Um, and as Alan Watts says, he kind of jokes that, like, when we say we want to self improve, who's the one doing the self improving? Like, how can you become better than where you are? Like, there's no other person but you in that situation. And when you compare yourself to someone else, you don't have the same context throughout the journey. So he says like self-improvement in a way is like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, like it's almost impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But he also says it's a necessary part of personal growth because you have to go through that. He uses the cool quote, a fool who dabbles in his folly becomes wise, or something like that. And basically what he's saying is you can't really do anything to fix yourself, grow yourself, become better, as they say. But you have to go through that in order to realize it's not possible, because eventually, unbeknownst to you, you realize that there's this energy that's actually there that you just needed to get to tap into. But a lot of being able to do that is burning through all these ideas you thought that you had control
Mm.
over the situation.
Sound like a
So I don't know
complex.
if I probably went on a tangent on
No,
that one. I
but
tend to do that.
sound like a complex process to me, anyways. I don't want to say I'm not willing to do it, but I feel like a lot of people would be unwilling to go through it.
Which process, like which part of the process, or what? Because that's really interesting. What do you not want to go through? Because I agree, a lot of people don't, but I'm curious to hear what for you
Might generally
is
just
dumb.
change. Like, why would I
Right,
change this if I'm comfortable with it? Other
right.
people are not
Mm.
comfortable with it, so why is it a problem? So maybe I'm not
Uh,
the problem. The others are. I don't believe this. I don't believe like
yeah,
this, but I'm
I
just
I
saying I have
I
this
I
process.
I understand where you're coming from,
Yeah.
Tierno, because I don't know if we can relate it, but in the last episode we were talking about, why don't some people exercise more and do more physical
Mm,
activities? And then we were saying like, why? Because a lot of people think of a physical activity it's just like an extra work they have to do, and it's so hard. And then a lot of people don't understand that they, in order to get the body that they want, that requires a lot of intense work and hours of work, and it can take months, and it's not going to be something they're going to get in like in a week.
mhm,
And so we were talking about how some people don't have this understanding, and then that's why they get turned off and they just don't do the work. It's like at the end of the day they're gonna say like, people just should love me for the way I am, for the way I look. And so I feel like if this is kind of similar too, like if it's just like whatever it is, personal development, improvement, or whatever you want to call it, I think just like exercise is also a lot of work.
it is.
And it's just like not just exercise and this, also there's many things that are a lot of work. You want to be successful in careers, it's a lot of work. If you want to be in education, there's a lot of work in so many areas. Everything is a lot of work, but I totally understand what you're saying. That it may be viewed that way, that people may have a willingness because people are tend to get very comfortable, and they
Hmm.
just already have their routines, and they don't want to get out of it so much because they just say like it's okay. But I also think it's something to do with empathy. I feel
Mm,
like there's some empathy here, because I think people may not realize that if they get better, then people around them will also benefit from that. It's not just themselves, right? Because if you can just master yourself, if you master areas about your personal self, your personal growth, if you can manage your emotions a little bit better, because I don't think it's possible to fully manage your emotions, they're unmanageable. But at the very least, you can work to improve that process of managing your emotions a little bit better. Who's going to benefit? The people around you are going to benefit. Your friends are going to benefit. Your family is going to benefit. Your partner is going to benefit. But just like you said, sometimes people are like, it's okay. Like they should just love me for who I am. And if they don't love me for who I am, then tough luck.
okay.
I don't know. Let's just. What do you think, Ryan, about that? Sure, you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think everyone's life path's so different, right? Like there's no right way to live. So I don't even like saying like personal development. I used to say it was like a must, like everyone should do it. But that was me projecting because it was important to me that everyone should do it. But
Hmm.
everyone's going to go through, if someone feels comfortable the way they are and with how they are, that's fine. And then there's others like myself and potentially you, Norman, from what I know of you, of like who are just curious about digging deeper. And I think because of that curiosity, the pain of staying the same is greater than the pleasure of being comfortable. And I think that's a big reason that anyone who really commits to change is it's so painful to stay where I am or like
Hmm.
what currently is or what is not comfortable. It's painful. So I feel
Yeah.
like that's pretty much fueling my growth right now. Is
Hmm.
it's not painful in a bad way, but it just, I can't imagine going a year from now and not feeling like I've gained a better relationship with my emotions or I've become a better communicator. For me, that feels so painful because of sort of how much I've invested in doing it over the years, right?
But
It
what do
just
you
feels,
think? What do you think drives you to be that way, though? Like, why don't more people do that? Because it feels like if more people will do that, like we will have just like a utopia almost. So,
mm.
because if you people are thinking the way you're thinking, uh, then I think we will have improvements all across the board. But yet,
Well,
yet this doesn't
it's
happen like that.
it's interesting because there's a couple things on that one where we could look at potential roles, right? As humans, forget about like economic roles or societal roles, but just the role we play in this lifetime. I think you can have, for me to accomplish what I'm accomplishing, to an extent, I need other people to play roles of being comfortable because it makes me very uncomfortable to be doing these things that are considered, or I think people consider as weird. So it develops, by doing it, it develops my courage, it develops my confidence, it develops resilience, it develops all these things that for me to play the best possible role as, say, a philosopher or a someone who likes to push the boundaries of thinking,
Hmm.
I need a lot of people around me who think normally. Because otherwise, if everyone didn't do it, there'd be nothing exciting about it. I think I wouldn't have the same passion necessarily, or I wouldn't have the same growth. I would have felt like everyone already knows this stuff. Why do I need to learn it again, or learn it at all? Um, so I think it's one of those cosmic games where there's, just like how we look and we can do things to ants, and ants may have no idea we're doing anything to them, or like putting something around them which they can't escape from. I think there could be something that's overwatching us, and not necessarily in a god sense, but in a sense where it's just playing a game and it doesn't really know. Actually, if you think about when we play games on TV, and Norman, me and you play games, you know how when you don't move the controller of the
Yeah.
character, they just look really like aloof, like
Bored.
Yes.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like how do we know that's when we're just kind of thinking in our head, somebody
Yeah.
isn't going through the menu and checking our different avatar characteristics? Like, like who knows what's going on in dimensions beyond ours? And um, so that's what kind of got me away from like worrying about why aren't more people doing it, is because you know there's so many reasons that could justify that. You would just drive yourself crazy trying to figure it out, and worst of all, you would put focus on things you can't control, which is other people's change, which is
Mm.
going to happen on their time, in their way, always. You
Hmm.
can influence it, but usually that's subconsciously, and usually it's unexpected or intentionally if they've given you permission. But other than
Yeah,
that,
I tend to do that, and I don't know if I wanted to, do it on purpose. But I just think like if I want certain things from some people, like for example in my relationships, I try to be as honest as possible. I try to be as forward as possible. I don't hold anything back, and I just say things how that I feel, how I think, um, and I that's just me. I just like to be genuine, and
right.
I don't expect people to be the same way. But at the very least, this is who I am, and if I'm influencing people to be a little bit that way, great. But I don't so much worry about it.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that's one of the biggest things that I feel has brought me peace, is the more I've let go of expectations of other people and even myself. I find it's just much more easier to go through life. And even when people don't change and they do things that irritate you, instead of trying or thinking to yourself, I wish they would change, and doing all these things that lead to no results, is with yourself and try to find out, why is this irritating me? And that's why I love meditation, and I've been actually drawn to it quite deeply these past few months, is when you can go into meditation and not let thoughts of I'm bored, I don't want to do this, all these thoughts that come to mind that don't really need to be there. But we tend to act on them instinctively or dwell on things that we can't do anything about. And meditation is this great way to just push yourself to say, uh, I don't want this pain. Why do I keep dealing with this pain? Especially when I'm sitting here aware of the fact that it's painful, yet I'm giving so much time and energy to it. And so meditation gives you that opportunity to be like, enough is enough. It's time to do something about it. And oftentimes coming up with a new thoughts around it could help, but in the end is also going to create chaos because you're going to think of infinite amount of thoughts all the time. So I found one of the biggest things that has really been influencing me lately is learning to just not think and learning to just let emotions and thoughts come up and sort of move on. Almost there's a saying I read or a quote by, I don't know who it was, but some sort of Chinese philosopher. And he said, imagine your mind, or if you want to look at it as your head, has a back door and a front door. And whenever thoughts and emotions come up that you don't want, you just let it go in one door and out the other without serving it tea. And I like it. You can even think of it like, having a beer with it. So if, emotions and thoughts come up and they keep coming up, yes, reflect on them. Yes, try to understand them. But there reaches a point where you're just not going to entertain them. You're not going to keep letting them take up valuable space and time. You're basically going to be like, we talked about this. I told you how I feel about you showing up and it's time for you to leave. And then once you use meditation to get into that rhythm, it's powerful because you can switch your mind and your focus. And like now I'm doing exercises to move my focus around my body so I can focus on areas that are really calm. So when other areas of my body feel stressed and tense, I can actually move my awareness within my body to focus on areas that feel very relaxed. And what it does is that focus on the relaxed starts to influence the tense areas, and the tense areas become much more relaxed. So it's amazing what the mind can do. I don't think we've been
Wow, I never thought
properly educated.
exercise that way, honestly. I was just like, oh, I gotta stay healthy and, hopefully look good, but not go to a way where I'm achieving mental clarity or I guess physical clarity, if you could call it that way. But that's interesting.
Yeah, it's fun when you're right. Like at the end of the day, this is not everyone's jam, and
Yep.
I'm not by any means gonna
Mhm.
expect that. But I think something I like to do is advocate for just giving it a chance in the
Mm,
sense that when you think about working out, a lot of times we're working out, but if you aren't aware what's going on inside, like how do you know what muscles are actually lifting the weight? Right. And even when, say, you lift the weight and you've been taught about the different muscles, how do you know what is influencing those muscles emotionally or how your thoughts are affecting those muscles? Like,
mm,
why is it that when you came out a baby, you didn't have to do anything to put all the body parts that you have on you? And to, how come you don't have to think about your heartbeat all the time?
mm,
And there's all these things that are operating on its own. There's got to be this element of clearing space for your body and your mind to continue to take care of you,
Mm.
which I think we've just been manipulated by society because from an economic standpoint, pain is profitable. If I can make you feel like you're in pain, and that's physical and emotional, you're more profitable to me than somebody who's at peace. Because how am I going to make someone who's at peace spend money on another iPod? Right? Like
wow. Well
it's not going
said.
to happen.
Yeah.
I need to make you feel insecure about the iPod you have, and I need to make you feel really less than in comparison to all your friends. I need to put all these things that make you feel more and more pain, but all those things are mental, and in a way, they just manifest as physical tension. But once you clean that out, and you're like, wait a minute, who's calling the shots here? Like, I don't want to get the government in this, but like, you know what I mean? Like the society and culture, or am I going to start to take back control and say, you know what? I know that right now, this commercial wants me to have this thought about myself and to have a nice tea party with it and to pamper it with gifts and to tell it, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. But I really don't want it to be here. So I'm going to ask it to politely put on its shoes and leave. And and it's not easy to do when everyone around you is saying, no, 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 you have to look at this, or you have to do this, or you have to buy this. And so I think that exercise of clearing that mental and emotional space, funny enough, impacts everything else.
And were you able to test this yourself over? Because I know you also consider physical exercise a very important part of your life. Do you have you been able to see that taking role as you do your own routines?
Yeah, because when COVID hit, I had to stop doing CrossFit. And as much as I liked CrossFit, I found it was very like uh, high vibration like activity.
Mhm.
Whereas with meditation, I feel like what I was doing was I was moving, but I wasn't able to stay conscious of my movement. And yoga is definitely a better place that I want to move towards. But with meditation, I'm learning these new ways of like just not letting myself trick myself into having uh, these programmed things about perceptions about my body, right? So like when I stretch, we have all these things that say I shouldn't feel this, I should feel this, you know, or we make up these limiting ways of like, oh, there's too much tension there, I can't stretch any further. And while that might be true, when you meditate, you're able to like hijack that programming
Hmm.
and start to push the boundaries a bit more where like I said, you can move your focus. So what I've been doing the past couple of days is I've been stretching, and every time I feel tension that's quote unquote painful, I shift my awareness to a really calm part of my body, preferably in the same area. And the part that I wanted to stretch, all of a sudden starts to loosen up.
Mm.
It's almost like it's listening to where I'm putting my focus. It's taking notes, it's doing its homework, and then it's mimicking that part of my where my awareness is being focused on. So it's not that, but what I used to do is I always used to put my focus to the intensity of
Mm.
feeling. So something
Mm.
that caught my attention from intensity, but I wasn't paying attention to type. So what I was unconsciously doing is paying attention to tension, pain, all the things I didn't want. And sure enough, by focusing so much on all those things I didn't want, they wouldn't go away because I'm basically saying to it, if I don't feel you anymore, it's going to feel weird. So I need to keep feeling you. I was basically keeping it hostage
Mm.
because I had to feel it because that was my way of knowing it was there, or I was normal, or I was me. Right? It was so defined.
I'm kind of laughing because I kind of warned Tierno that we will get into deep topics.
Oh
And,
man, uh,
He's like, dude, I
not
need
that
some
I'm
tea right now
laughing,
with
but I'm
some,
like, this
THC in
guy is
it.
smart, intelligent. He's a sports psychologist. Like, what else can you not do?
I mean, I can get into these topics all day long, but I also like to get a little bit about some of the stuff you've done, which is interesting. And maybe you can share a little bit because I think Tierno would like to hear this too. Is your Africa experience?
Hmm.
If you can maybe share about that.
Yeah, and by the way, like I don't ever want to feel um, that I'm just talking and like it's going over your head. So feel free to like jump in and even just challenge stuff that comes to mind. I love learning perspectives that I may not even
I'm
be seeing.
mostly listening. That's why I'm kind of
Okay, okay,
processing everything you're saying. That's why it sounds
right.
like I'm just, silent because it's getting over my head, which it is. But still, I'm still learning, in a way.
Well, and I
Hey,
find oftentimes it'll just subconsciously be there when the time
yeah,
is right,
yeah,
and when you need it,
to jump
you just have someone that said it before that helps you remember
in.
it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but maybe context from Africa will give
Sure,
good insight into why what
let's do it.
ended up here is. So thanks for asking that, Norman. So I went to Africa, Ghana, West Africa in 2008 in November, and I stayed till for a year till end of 2009. And it was fascinating because at that time I had just graduated from university. I graduated with honors in aerospace engineering. I had my pilot's license through Air Cadets, two pilots license, and I, gone flying a lot, taken friends flying. So in a way, I was on top of the world, but I was also really deep into my ego. I had a clearly defined personality of who I was, who I needed to defend, and like the person I needed to defend about me. And yeah, I lacked compassion. I lacked a lot of things that when I went to Ghana, I think I had seen so many things that resonated with me, but I don't think I realized how much it would resonate with me looking back in retrospect. Um, so in that experience, having that ego, you kind of, I think it's a different lifestyle. Like I definitely believe I've helped a lot of people, and I definitely got feedback that I built some really great relationships. But I think for the most part, I was stuck in my head, always trying to fix things and always trying to make things better and always trying to uh, uh, potentially be the savior, be someone that went there and, you know, not, I don't want to say I consciously knew this, but there was this idea of like, I'm better than you. And
Mm.
what Ghana really taught me, when I, especially when I look back now, is how the people there, um, they can accept that, but there's just something different about them that I think I carry with me a lot today, where even though I had come and like, they kind of played it. They made me feel like a king. They made me feel like I knew what I was doing. They were always so interested in me, and they were so fascinated. And I think they were just so humble to uh, this not having an ego because of the amount of hardships that they've had to deal with over time. And me living such a pampered life and then going there didn't have that relative experience. So I think as I move forward with my life now, I remember how important it is to a go through experiences that challenge us to the point of rock bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and how that humbleness and humility and compassion that we grow from those experiences are what really leave an impact on people. Because when I think back to Ghana, it's never about the stuff I did from like quote unquote a work standpoint. It was always about how the people made me feel. Like, you'd be walking down this dirt road. I had a dirt road that went from the house I stayed at, which was a local resident's house. They gave me a room. So I'd go into like a small town down this dirt road, and whenever I'd walk down the dirt road, you us as Westerners have this typical mentality to like look down or maybe do a small smirk, but like if we don't know somebody, we don't really acknowledge them. Whereas them in Ghana, they'll look at you, they'll put on this big smile, and they'll be like, "Hey," and you're like, "Hey," and you're like, "Oh, how do we know each other?" And like, "Oh, I don't know you. I
I
just
just,
wanted
yeah,
to say
very
hi."
warm and welcoming, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then you just get sucked into this new friendship, and you think back. And I remember when I came to Canada, I'm like, I want to do that. Like, I want to go on the TTC, but it's so difficult because the context is so difficult, the culture is so difficult, and so that's that cultural difference, I think, is the biggest thing that I carry with me, and like I try to express so that I can honor like what they've done for me
Mm-hmm.
over time in becoming just a more genuine and humble human being, which they were to me overall.
Yeah, I mean, as you guys know, I am from Africa, and you
Right.
know, I've grew up there for about 13. I was there for like 13 years before I moved to Canada. And honestly, to this day, most of the decision I make, I always think about the experience or how my life
Interesting.
was, or what would my parents say, or what would my parents do, right? And it's still to this
In
day.
Senegal,
And
like when they would what? Okay.
like, yeah, meaning that, let's say I'm taking a job right now, right? And maybe I don't like the job, the salary, right? But I was always think about my experience, or where I came from, or the opportunity that I have
Mm,
now, or am I being too braggadocious for asking more, or there's all these things that always come up in my mind because of the experience and how I live there, being in poverty and getting out of poverty. That um, I think that will never get away from me. Doesn't matter how long I live in Canada.
hmm.
Um, I mean, maybe it's hard for me to explain it to other people, but that's how I personally feel with a lot of things.
So you're saying that your experience coming from Senegal and what you remember growing up there, and you remember what it was like being there, you always have that in the back of your mind as a reference point for all the experience that you're living here, and that's sort of
100%.
like kind of it's like a framework for you.
100%.
Right.
Easy example. If I'm being offered a food I don't like, right? I will not decline it as a way as that, like, I don't like this food because it's not my preference. But I will just remember that when I was in Senegal, if anybody offered me any kind of meals, right, I would take it. So respectfully, I would take it in Canada and eat some of it just to show respect that, hey, thank you for your offering. It means a lot to me that you're offering me this thing. Uh, to certain people, they will not see it that way, but it's still in my back of my mind because I still remember that my parents were telling me, hey, always remember, you got to be grateful for what you have. And I wasn't even rich, but compared to other my cousins, or I would say my friends, I was seen as someone who had more than others. So now that in a point of my life where I have more, I can still I'm still making good decision or making respectful decision based on that experience, because I don't. It's my way of saying, uh, life could be worse, and
Mm.
if even if certain things are not the way I like it, I should at least respect the fact that I have the option of having it in my life. I know that's a long
What's
rant,
so
but yeah.
yeah, what's so interesting about that, and I think tying it back to personal development and our growth is I think we forget how important experiences are. Like we can think about something all we want and study it and read books about it, but ultimately, until we have the right experiences that we are get lost
Mm,
in it, and when I say that, meaning like we're fully absorbed by and we go through the emotions associated with that experience, that's what changes us. That's what creates those pain points that are going to lead us in certain directions, um, because we felt what it's like to be at a certain place that we just don't want to be at anymore.
never.
um, and so it's interesting to hear when you're talking about like that type of poverty, and I think about how uh, I grew up always with food on the table and a roof over my head in a middle class family where if I'm having a hard time I can go stay at home. And like the hardest thing I've been through was not having my business work out after 7 years of running
Mm.
it. And so when you put that in
Mm,
perspective, it's amazing where how our journeys differ, because sometimes we just can't we can't we can try to empathize,
mm.
but we can never fully empathize with somebody else, which makes it and also dictates how what's important to us, which is why I think I'm so interested in this, advanced philosophical stuff, is I feel like I've been given such a chance to study it and such an opportunity to study it.
Yeah.
Um,
And I will tell you personally, when I moved to Canada, I was very judgmental, but to other people. Oh, why they don't like this? Why did they think why did they think they're better than, right? But no, that's what they know. They can only base their life on their experience. So who am I
mhm.
to judge them for their taste or their needs, right? I mean, Norman likes orange juice fresh, right?
Or
I would,
pineapple
yeah,
juice.
I
He'll
would
even buy the pineapple.
exactly. I would drink anything, but that's Norman's experience. So who am I to judge him on this podcast, right?
What are you
But
saying? What are you saying, Tierno? What are you
now I'm
saying?
just saying be a little bougie sometimes, especially when it comes to orange juice.
That's for sure.
But
That's for sure.
yeah, no, it's just interesting that I have this perspective, and like over time it evolved, right? Over time it
Right.
evolved. Now that I got those, like, the Senegalese and the Canadian perspective, I can see where I can, maybe change or be a little bit more humble in certain situations.
And, yeah, and I think that's like it's funny how subjective who we are, how we evolve, how we grow is, but just based on how we live in like a commercialized economy where it's products of scale and wanting to like make as much money as possible, how that industry has kind of, and sorry, I know I go to personal development a lot, but it's just such a big part of my life where I just realized how one of the reasons I left coaching, at least for myself personally, and I'm not saying it's by any means it's an occupation that isn't helpful. It helps, but for me, why I couldn't do it anymore is the journey became so personal.
Mm,
And for me, I wanted to be able to like just improv the whole journey, both in with myself, but also helping others, and not feel like there were any answers to it, or feel like there were any right approaches, or feel like I had to give the person any results. It just had to be just something that if they needed help, I could just give them what I know, and like help them expand with it should they decide to or not. Um, and I think over time, I see how personally everyone grows based on their past
Oh yeah.
experiences, and how fun it is to see them get to a place. Like when I think of Norman, just over how many years since 2011,
9 years.
I feel like I've seen so many different sides of you, but more so like the depths of your personality and character that have come through certain experiences and shared experiences that we've had, that are so subjective to your story, having come from Peru and moved to Canada.
Yeah, and I like Tierno. I not as much as Tierno because I think Tierno's experience is fresher than mine. I've been in Canada for like 22 years, but I actually do use my frame of reference because I think I shared this before. I don't know if I'm sharing it before in this podcast, but I did grow up in a shanty town essentially in Peru. Like that was like one of the poorest parts of Lima, where where the houses were very precarious and had a roof and stuff. But it was a very poor time because also like there was a civil war going on in Peru, and there were a lot of like car bombs and constantly not having electricity and doing homework and candlelight. I mean, those are the struggles I think that sort of just shape your life, right? Because then you can
Yeah.
just always just remember that like look, orange juice or whatever else that you want to complain about. There are certain things that just like that are more important, and your focus should be driven to things that are more, let's say, long lasting, not long lasting, but things that are more transcendental, let's say,
Hmm.
than things that are not as important, and that your focus should shift to those things, I think. But I use that point of reference, and that's what one of the things why like Tierno and I get along well, because we kind of like share that sort of like similar experience in that sense. And also like Tierno, you were saying how you had a theory about something about people's not having experiences like that and COVID-19, because people like there was a lot of people taking a lot of risks and whatnot.
Hmm. It's just the fact that if you lived in a society with abundance of privilege, when it's time to make any sacrifice, it doesn't matter how small or big it is. It's hard, man. It's really hard because you feel like you're giving away something that should not be given away. Like the example mask. I don't know, like this might be a wild, I guess, comparison, but people will wear condoms when they have sexual relationship, right? For certain, cause to avoid certain things like pregnancy or STDs,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they're not willing to wear a mask for just certain, a few minutes to go to a store. I mean, we're all hypocrites to a certain extent, but I just don't
Hmm.
understand these kind of things where it's like you don't want to die, you don't want to have AIDS, let's say, right? That
Yeah.
might be the extreme example, but
Is this
you're
condom comparison something you came up with, or is it something
oh,
you
this
heard?
I came up with. Like I just thought
Oh
about it like
wow,
a few
I
days
never
ago.
heard of that one. Eh?
I'm
That was
like,
pretty good actually.
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah, it was.
yeah, I'm like how if you wearing it for that
Yeah,
period of time, you can just
yeah,
wear a mask. But I don't
yeah.
know why I'm getting annoyed about people not wearing a mask. I mean, it's their lives, right? Maybe I'm
Right.
just more worried about us getting over the pandemic as fast as we can. But I mean, who am I to tell people what to do?
You said something really um, interesting there, where
Hmm.
at the beginning you said people have a lot harder time giving up, making sacrifices when they haven't. What was it? Like when do they have a hard time making sacrifices?
Yeah, like kind of like an abundance of privilege, right?
Right,
So
with abundance and
yes.
privilege, and like just being someone who's kind of lived on that, that side of always being, never really being in like a dangerous place in my life. Uh, I can see how how that change is different,
Hmm.
because yeah, you just don't realize. how bad things can get or how much worse they can be by taking these small actions.
Yeah, no, it's tough. And again, like I told Norman many times, I think if the pandemic started in November, this wouldn't be an issue. Like everybody would be at home because it's winter,
Right.
and then we'll all be prepared to wear masks. But it's just the fact
And
that
Amazon would just rule the world.
exactly
It
they're already
basically,
ruling.
Jeff, it already does, but yeah, he would just.
But to this point where the Canadian summer is so short and people really want to enjoy themselves, I understand it, honestly. I understand why people are willing to take certain risks. Maybe not just to, specifically on the mask subject, but just, the risk of going to places with a lot of people, or like one of our friends gave us an example of a friend who was in a kind of like a small boat cruise kind of thingy with 30 people. I don't know why would anyone do that during COVID, but hey, to each his own, I guess.
Well, and that's where it's it's always a fascinating battle when it comes to, we have people on all sides of all different issues. And one of the things that I think we're seeing right now is like, how do we come to solutions for really big problems where, people have very drastic views. And, I don't think there's a right way, but I've always been cautious of, you know, the fighting way, the battle way,
Yes.
because it tends to only erupt more anger in
Hmm.
the person that you're trying to stop.
Yeah.
Like if you're trying to get someone to stop something, you trying to say what you're doing is wrong. Just think about it in our own lives. When someone says we're wrong, our ego defense mechanism kicks in and we try to either justify why we're right or why they're wrong. And it's just like, that competitive nature I think that we've been surrounded by. But it's also difficult when I say, as a general statement, we need to have more discussions. But that's also difficult, seeing as we haven't been properly educated in communication, and it's not always possible. And like, people are dying. So
Yeah.
like, is that the right approach? So it's a very interesting. I feel like we're in a very interesting time where there's a lot of information being passed around. And something I found really helpful for myself is I got rid of all social media about 2, 3 weeks ago. Actually, I think I'm almost a month now.
Hmm.
And it's been the greatest decision of my life. And I say that because I used to be someone that at one point was very, very addicted to it. I used Facebook, and in a way, Facebook was really helpful when I had a business. Not so much even for getting clients and customers. It definitely did help, but more just having the support when I would do a lot of things that I was really scared to do, as a first time business owner. So I get all these likes and supports. Like, I'm going to speak at this school, and everyone would be like, you can do it, Ryan. And even though I bombed royally, I could just think of like, oh, I have all this support. And so it was great at a point. And then I became more and more like, I felt like I was trying to communicate on a platform that doesn't facilitate communication properly, because it pins you to your ideas as you're growing, because you have this thread of history. And when you try to deal with someone in the comments, you're not seeing things that can come up when we talk to each other. And so I was just getting more and more pushed away. And then I hit this point where I was like, just scrolling through it mindlessly, to pass time. And I didn't realize how much it was shaping what I prioritize in my life and where I put my focus. And it just kind of takes over like what we consider important. So when I got rid of it, it's amazing how much more like normal meditation felt like, because I was like, there's nothing else to do. I'm kind of tired of watching Netflix right now. So I'm going to sit here and meditate. And nowhere is there anyone saying that's weird, or like, is there anybody showing off like, I'm going here and doing this, or I'm really, really active in this. It's almost like you get to create this space for yourself to kind of your own little playground, whether that's, both physically and mentally and emotionally, and explore it without everyone defining who is Norman Valdez, who is Diouf. Am I
Yeah.
saying it
Oh
right, by
wow,
the way?
that's good. Good.
Great.
Really good.
Whew,
Well,
whew.
clearly, you've been
Uh,
to Africa.
Right, exactly. Uh, and who is Ryan Coelho? Because all those identities we've developed over the years, especially when we were young, were definitely not us. It was everybody else telling us who we were, and we just kind of fell in line. And so I find social media does a great job of like perpetuating that identity because you have that lineage of stuff you post that all of a sudden creates this shape around who you are. And you have all
Mm,
these people on your feed that define the conversations you're part of.
mm.
And now we're seeing social media become more and more um, I don't want to say
Like
belligerent. I think that's the wrong word.
like an enabler. Like it's enabling.
Enabler, yeah, like they want to trigger you. Like, don't post that without this hashtag or you're wrong. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. And
Yeah.
you live in more and more guilt and fear
That's
than
true.
actually feeling like you got to know somebody by the end of the conversation or at the end of the experience by being on it. Like
I
maybe
rem-
there's some nice videos or stories, but
I
those
remember
last,
like when I was doing my blog, which I had a blog site, and I
right?
was writing a lot of content in it, and sometimes I would sort of share that content through my social media, um, through my personal Facebook because I also had a page for that blog, and I did get a few times certain people who just reacted very negatively to the content of what I was sharing, and then even to the point like where some people who I consider to be friends would even say rude things to me. They would say like
Mm,
this is very idiotic what you're saying, but I was like, but it's I'm just exploring an idea, and
right.
I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm not saying like I'm right. I'm
And you're
sharing
not
my
even saying that's where the buck stops. It's
yeah.
just a moment in time,
But
a thought.
but I remember seeing like just like you were saying like with the hashtags, I was trying to see how people would react in ways that I was that would be like very surprised and negative, and even like into the point of attacking where I actually had to block some people because it was just very rude, and I just
Mm.
don't want to have people who are like reacting this way in my Facebook. And then you know I don't say like that's one reason why I stopped writing, but I did find that a little bit demotivating. To the point it was like I was like, okay, I want to express myself, but I want to express myself differently. And also, like, if I want to express myself, why do I need to share with the rest of the world? Isn't it not just enough that I just have conversations with my friends where I explore some of these ideas or where I share some of these things? And so, like, yeah, kind of like you, I sort of realized like I don't need like validation from everyone. I don't need anyone to tell me this is great, and like I'm just gonna do. If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it because I want to do it. I'm not gonna
It's
do
an
it because I want
expression of you,
validation.
not a
Yeah, that's why like I was thinking like the next evolution of that sort of way of dealing with information, like in the way that we're doing now with this podcast, is like the next evolution for me was a podcast because I feel that it is a different way of sharing your thoughts and ideas and opinions while at the same time meeting cool people and just sharing some of
right.
those with people who are also just get some reactions to what you're
Mhm.
saying, because this is what a good conversation should be. And I don't know, it just sort of went that way for me when it comes to social media.
Well, something that's coming to mind that ties back to what you said, Thierno, about unlearning and like getting to that point of being able to become more emotionally, I don't like to use the word intelligent, but just aware
Aware, yeah.
and like, yeah, you know what I mean? And it's defined by this quote by Viktor Frankl, which I'll read. And it says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. In our response lies our
Mm.
growth and our happiness. And I think what's so interesting about unlearning is what we tend to do is when we're sitting by a fire that's burning us and we don't like, is we keep the sources of fuel for that fire going. And we just keep unknowingly sometimes oftentimes, I'm not saying it's like something we do to actually intentionally hurt ourselves, but we keep these floods of information or these floods of emotional um, things that are coming at us, especially if you think of the news is very much directed to the
Oh,
negative,
yeah.
and we keep all of this stimulus that we're always just reacting. We don't even have time to get to a response because there's no space. We're just going off our default because we're trying to keep up with that information. Whereas, like, I found as soon as I stopped social media, and as of about 2, 3 weeks ago, I basically locked my credit card and said, no more buying stuff. If you get bored or you need to do something, you have enough, look around my room, go for a walk, figure it out. And it's amazing how much space I'm able to grow for myself, that when I've been tested by a few emotional situations in the past week, and things that took me months, if not years, to get past a few years ago, or even just a year ago, has taken me days to get through, because I have so much more space to move through those emotions, to readjust them, to develop a proper relationship, to see where they reflect and see where they're coming from, to do all these things that we typically fill our space with so much stimulus. We don't actually know what we're doing to respond. It's just constant reaction. And we think it's a response. We think we're consciously doing something to that stimulus, but we're not. We're in a pattern. And then we get lost in that pattern, and it just becomes like Groundhog Day, where you wake up and you're doing the same thing over and over again, just with different situations.
Yeah. No, I totally can relate to that because in the last podcast, once again, a reference to that, we were talking about how sometimes, and this is in reference to COVID-19, right? Like I was saying that COVID-19 to me is kind of like reboot, like the world is just rebooting right now. It's just like
Mm,
Mhm.
we're going through something. We were collecting a lot of stuff through that, kind of like a computer collects a lot of information in the RAM space, in the memory space, and then sometimes it gets overloaded, and then when it gets overloaded or gets like you have to press Control Alt Delete and then just delete some applications, you need to just reset that computer because it's the only thing you can do. And I just feel like maybe the world kind of like, I mean, I won't say needed it, but it's just sort of like what it's going through right now. It's like a reboot of the world, uh, and then as a result of that, because it's a situation that is unique, and we were just talking about how certain people just cannot relate to anything that is of this nature because they never had the opportunity to experience something as harsh as this, because this has been harsh in many different ways for different people. Even if harsh could be defined as, oh, I cannot get a haircut and I have to get a haircut in like 3 months or 4 months instead of like every month like I usually do, or every week for some people. And that could be harsh because of the level of experience that they have. But I I just think that sometimes for people to be able to get themselves out of that element, that routine that you were talking about, right? You sort of like need these moments to just take you out of that element, that routine, and then make you
yeah,
see different things. And you need to be shaken sometimes to be able to see different things and do things differently and discover different things about yourself that you didn't even know about, and then you maybe would want to explore and see where it would go. And also like relationships can also appear that way, can also manifest. And and so yeah, just kind of like how I see this whole COVID-19 for me is just this big reset button. And I don't know, because I like to reflect on things. I've reflected on this quite a lot. And having accepted that as a reality for me, I am able to do things that, like this podcast wouldn't have probably come up if it wasn't for
mm,
COVID-19. So it was always in the back of my mind, but like I'm doing it now, and it's probably COVID-19 is related.
But Mohammed, what
Not
was your excuse for the podcast before? Was it time? Was it um like
this.
kind of scared of starting something new?
Well, I described it kind of before when talking about I was writing a lot of blog posts,
Uh-huh.
and I was getting just sometimes negative reactions, and then I was just trying to see that maybe I should change the format of this expression, because I have in me a need to express myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to express what I think, or bounce ideas, explore different things. I have this need to do that, and I always had it. And actually, during the time where the blog site got shut down, well, it's not really shut down. It's still there actually, but it's not visible. And when it stopped, let's say, and this podcast, there was always like a void in me that I needed to fill somehow, which I was doing by having conversations with people like Ryan, for example, where I would like have deep conversation, talk and bounce ideas. But I still feel it like I need something a little something else
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, and that's why. a podcast seemed to be the good format.
But why do you think it's now and not when, like pre-COVID? Is it because now you feel like,
Um,
you can actually talk about a lot of things, or the time you have more
I,
free time?
I feel like I don't know about everybody else, but my experience is that, and also because I live alone now,
Mm,
is that I had a lot of time to just sit and think, and whether it's like in my room or in my living room or in a park under a tree, which is usually what I like to do, is that I like to sit down and reflect and think. And out of those reflections, then I would realize, I'm at home a lot, because of the quarantine, and there is a way to have more time to look into things, to research things, like equipment, for
mm,
example. You need to have good equipment. Like if I want to do something proper, I need to really do it proper. So I need, like, what do I need? What kind of equipment do I need? What kind of software do I need? What kind of, like, marketing do I need? And so those things have just kind of flourished because I had the time to think, sit down and think about and analyze, like, what are the best ways, methodologies, researching how other people doing and stuff, and asking other people who I know who are doing podcasts, like Redman, who was on the first episode and who is our friend. Uh, how do they do podcasts? And all of those things need to happen, I think, for me to get to the point where I can actually just do it. And also, you also were a good motivator too, because I
yeah,
told you, like, like anything, like if you want, sometimes you want to go to a gym and lose weight. Sometimes having a buddy to lose weight together helps, right?
it does.
So, so in
Trust
this case, so in this case, if you want to do the podcast and if you have a buddy who wants to do podcast with you, it helps because it is just sort of like reinforces that motivation to do
me.
it. So yeah, that those are kind of like the factors that played in.
Well, there's nothing that quite is better than at helping you move from reaction to a response than disrupting routine, right? Like as soon as you disrupt routine, your mind can't go on autopilot.
Yeah,
So when you think about like the commute to work, the working structure, and like having potentially kids at home, having to like maybe less stress from needing to buy lunch, but also the stress from less money. Like there's all these things that we need to reconsider. That
yeah,
while stressful, I think it also builds our capacity to uh, uh, build a muscle of that conscious mind that does the reflecting and the um, more conscious decision making rather than default decision making.
yeah,
So it's been an interesting time for that because I think while space has been taking up with a lot of like concerns, fears, and worries for sure, I think there's also now more space for people um, to just they're forced to reconsider a lot, and in that reconsideration process, I think it's just you're more intentional with where you put your time and what you do, because in a way, working from home and stuff, you have to be in order to get your stuff done.
yeah. And I think it was that too, like you were saying that, like especially like if you had to commute, like you were saying, you commute, and you have to like on the subway or whatever, and you're tired, and you go home, and you have to have dinner, and then after dinner you probably watch a movie on Netflix, and then after that you go play video games, and then that's it. That's your day.
Yeah, you sometimes don't even know you live through the day. You're like, oh, it's already
Oh,
nighttime.
Yeah,
Did I even?
but it's something just disrupts that. Whereas like it's not like that anymore. It's like now I'm working from home, and I had the opportunity to do that. Then um, then you start to see things very different. I don't know how do you guys think about um, that concept?
mm, that's interesting.
Any thoughts, Tuna?
No, I mean, not that anything that's coming up right now, to be honest. Um, no, I will just say I don't know, honestly. Yeah, because I'm.
I'd say like for me, the change in pace was more just helpful in making me feel a bit more normal and like I could live how I wanted to because I've always wanted to for quite a while be more just get to know solitude, be okay with being alone, not feel like I always have to rush off and do stuff. And so it just I think didn't make me feel bad that or like have to justify to people why I'm staying inside. In a way, it was like, oh, you got to stay inside. This is perfect. It's like the prime conditions for learning to meditate. Whereas before, when you're like, oh, I need to meditate, and people are like, oh, that's weird. You should go to a party. Like, what's wrong with you? It's just a lot harder to justify, I think.
Judgment, judgment.
Yeah, and like it's already a difficult moving into the spiritual realm in such a science-based culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I've moved to becoming a very private person about the stuff I share because, like Norman, I felt like I needed the validation for a long time of someone being like, "Yeah, you're right," but I realized that's not why I want to do it or why I want to believe something. I want to believe it because it resonates, and I also want the ability to change that belief when it no longer resonates. And I found that when you keep your circle with um, or you surround yourself with people that understand what you say is not a matter of fact, but rather just a matter of thought,
Mm-hmm.
it makes such a more growth oriented environment to really explore things that maybe not aren't looked upon as you know good or bad or whatever the common ends of the spectrum we use because it's just easier to do that than actually explore things, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I'll be honest, the reason why I said I don't know is because I got like a pretty serious injury right before COVID. So most of my focus was pretty much, hey, um, how do I recover? Do research and how do I properly heal my Achilles for the next 6 to maybe a year? And it took me a while before I started reflecting on what can I do better and how can I change certain pattern and how can I take advantage of this free time to be able to better myself. Because most of my focus honestly was either work or oh, my leg. How do I get better? Why am I not getting better? Why is my physiotherapist saying I'm ahead of schedule, but I feel like I'm not? It's um, so it was an interesting time for me, and it still is because I'm still not 100%. But I've learned how to adjust with it. So I pretty much had, to deal with COVID and pretty, serious injury at the same time. But it didn't change too much of who I am, but it made me um, a little bit more cautious about certain things, about the decision I make, and
Did you feel you got more space though to like
to
get better and recover?
100%. Oh my God! Like I was
Yeah,
telling Norman all the time, I'm so happy, not so happy, but kind of glad that this happened during this period because I actually have
right,
time to properly recover.
right.
I'm not rushed to go back to work. I'm not in a rush to go up steps or potentially slip, or I have enough time to get back to 100% without worrying about other things, and that could be my focus and not just work. So yeah.
Yeah, something interesting about what space can give
Mm.
us, and like the quote is so bang on when it's like, in that space lies our freedom to choose our response. How are we going to respond to our situation? And when we don't have that, and that's my worry is we hear this talk about going back to normal, and part of me feels like, do we really want to go back to that lifestyle
Oh
of
man.
like just reacting to everything and continuing to um, just when you think of a lot of the negative stuff that goes on, it's because emotions haven't been properly
Cope
uh,
with. Yeah.
yeah, and dealt with. It's just
Routine.
stuff building up, and then like an explosion, it just comes out, and then that's why we see all these things that even if they're one-offs, they can be very you know disastrous.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe some of us are just thinking about the most positive parts about returning, like the camaraderie, the hanging
Mm,
out, the having the freedom to just choose what I could do. Maybe that's what we're focusing on, but we're not really saying specifically why we want to get back to
right.
to
Or
normal.
understanding like how much potentially we are reacting to life rather than responding to it properly and consciously. And like you said, is that even something that people feel is valuable? Because if that seems like something that's work, then there's really no changing. That person just has to come to enough pain with the
Mhm.
same in order to get to a point of change, right?
No, for sure. And like I was just wondering, what do you think one thing that might be very negative from this, you know, period of the pandemic when it comes to like human relation? Because I feel like it might change how we
Hmm.
approach each other, how might change the, you know, the fact of how warm we are with each other. It was already, you know, a little dicey, I would say, from time to time. Like the example you gave in the TTC, where, you know, you might not be able to be as, you know, kind of forward and welcoming as you were in Ghana. So what do you think might be the changes that would occur now? I know the
Funny enough, I think I'm gonna go back to like I'm actually more scared that we'll go back to how we were before because
mm,
it's easy to fall in back into those patterns. But from what I've seen personally, there's much more of like a desire to want to feel touch and like feel more emotionally connected.
oh,
So I actually don't find that people are, even if you walk by someone, yes, we create distance between each other, but I feel like I'm saying hi to people more. And it just feels like you're kind of, we're all in this together
mhm,
kind of mentality. So I haven't felt the, um, are we going to be more cautious? I think that the way this COVID thing is turning out to be, like if it lives in the air for 7 days, it's a point of like minimizing rather than necessarily avoiding until there comes something that can prevent it altogether.
mhm.
So I think there's a little bit of an understanding that's starting to like, or at least maybe not understanding, but a common, you know, reality that people are starting to um, come to accept, whether it's fully true or not. But yeah, I worry that, we go back to these as though someone, I think actually I heard this somewhere. We go back to a point where we pretend none of this happened
Hmm.
and we end up just getting lost in the the monkey mind and the routine again and just running around and pretending we're making progress, but we actually haven't really considered for ourselves what is progress. Is progress, getting a higher job and getting more responsibilities and maybe less time with your family? Or is it actually spending more time with your family and maybe not getting to that position because of what's involved and not feeling like you need to live up to everybody's typical expectation of
Mhm.
success, which is about having the best job? And for as someone who's sort of like starting to move away from feeling like I need career success of any kind, it's interesting because when I see how much success I'm having in other areas of my life, I'm like, uh, I can't imagine trading this for career
No, for
success.
sure.
You couldn't trade it at this point. Like it's just so meaningful to be able to do this work that that turns me on, that
Hmm.
gets me lit, and to go play this role that I felt like I had to play in order to survive in Toronto, which before the pandemic was this game that I just didn't want to participate in, but
This city,
felt like I had to.
so expensive.
Oh, and then you're only doing the making the money to fund these things, which really is just to be social, so that you can feel like you're part of the city. But it's like, wait a
But
minute,
is it
like
worth it? Yeah,
no,
at one point I'm
you
like,
know,
is it worth putting half of your salary just to live in a little tiny space, but it is downtown
right?
just because?
To say I live
Yeah,
downtown Toronto,
but I feel like,
in a place where you can't not pay to do
oh my
anything.
god,
Like
yeah.
you always are paying for something, whether
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the bike share, TTC.
Which is never cheap. It's still not cheap. Well, I'm not expecting
Exactly.
it to go down, but I sure hope they're not, you know, increasing the price due to, loss of profit. But I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, who knows now, right? With what's going on and like how the business has been. I bet you they're going to put it up again,
At
unfortunately.
one point.
But what I would say is I actually do see a lot more positives, like with this pandemic, when it comes to leveraging more
Oh
technology.
my God, yes.
Like I would love us to get to a point where we have holographic technology where you can start to experience being in the same place as someone else that might not be with you. And what can that how can that change conversations that we have, which right now we're battling it out over using words,
Mm-hmm.
which miss out on so much information when it comes to resolving conflict.
Yep.
If anything, it creates more conflict because it's usually based in polar opposites, yes or no, right or wrong, and there's no gray area in social media. And if there is, it's very hard to have a meaningful dialogue when there's like 50 million messages or comments. So that the environment not being, pillaged every day with so many people going to work that might not need to, the potential of maybe having universal basic income
Oh,
becomes something that
yeah.
is initiated and people can actually live with some dignity, you know, no matter who they are in this
Mm-hmm.
country. When Jeff Bezos, I'm sure, will be fine without another $12 million house.
Yeah.
So, like, how do we make sure we're taxing those businesses? And again, I don't mean that only the rich, like, yes, the rich people. Part of me feels like just being an entrepreneur, how much work goes into building that stuff. So I don't want to take away what they've been able to do, but I think there's also an element of like a
Yes.
lot of what sustains us are these people, like we're seeing the essential workers, the grocery people that are going to work every day, potentially putting themselves in harm's way when you know it was great to see the athletes disappear
Oh
so
my
we could
God,
give,
yes.
yeah, these people that I used to be a grocery store worker and
Okay.
it was almost felt demeaning, like you're. So it's nice to see that, but it's heartbreaking to see that Loblaws decides to take away
The
that
big
$2 an hour raise before this thing is over, and you're like, really, you couldn't spare $2 an hour? And so part of me thinks like this whole currency, which isn't based in any gold anymore,
Mm-hmm.
has no proper reference. The fiat currency needs to be destroyed, and we need to like find a way to measure proper energy exchange of you know when someone is putting in effort, they get rewarded for that effort, not for some random person who happens to have generations of control over that industry or whatever decide what that looks like, right?
No, for sure. And to come back to that Jeff Bezos example, it's just the fact of fairness. That's all. I don't understand how a
Right.
person who has billions of dollars cannot pay like 1% of tax when someone
Exactly.
who's making 30,000 is paying tax, or at least
And not even like not
filing
feel
a tax.
happy about the fact you're like supporting so many people,
Yes,
like how.
it's
And that's what I think unfortunately business has become, is a narcissistic game
mm,
to an extent. I want to make a blanket statement. I've met some fantastic CEOs who have great hearts, but unfortunately they're playing this in this territory that's driven by more, more,
mm,
more, more.
yes.
Like there's never enough, and like you're only gonna be admired if you find a way to go bigger and better, hustle more, and
All these slogans,
that,
grind and
yeah, and all those things imply what you would do to a car that's breaking down, and basically the parts aren't being taken care of and there's no proper maintenance. It's like, no, no, we're not going to invest in this machine, we're just going to run it to the ground. And that's what we're doing to people, like you said, not paying fair wages and just taking these people for granted.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, from what quote unquote matters in this economic world is what's on the piece of paper when it comes to numbers. So we paid our employees the less, got the most out of them, and made the most profit for our shareholders. I deserve to be on Entrepreneur Magazine. And sure enough, you see that person on Entrepreneur Magazine. It's like, really?
Well,
Where did our priorities go? Where did the humanness go?
at one point that's what we valued, right? And then COVID happened, and you're like, those person don't seem as not important,
Right.
but as these grandiose personality as they were to serve.
And part of
So,
me hopes that, sorry, Norman, I interrupted there.
oh no, no, you finish your thought. Finish your thought, please.
Yeah, something that, and I would love, I don't know if either of you guys know the stats, but I would love to, I would have, I hope that people are in like using this time to move away from the material game and maybe notice how much more valuable the relationship game is, the solitude game is, the living with less because you're not comparing with everybody else. And you know, I don't ever want to. I'm projecting, and I'm probably saying this because it worked for me. But I highly recommend going off social media, even just to see the difference. And it took me a few times to actually get to the point of not wanting to go back on.
Mhm.
But I find like when it clicks and you realize, you know, all the stuff you really want to share, you'll probably share through WhatsApp with people you really care about, and all the other stuff that you see on Facebook are likely going to be people you don't keep in touch with as much. You can actually really shape your world in a very, very meaningful way, much more meaningful and less stressful. Um, so if people can do that in this pandemic, I think, yes, it would be challenging because you're taking away from interaction, but I actually think you'll be creating more connection because you'll be forced to go and call up people
Mm.
or talk to people when you're walking around, um, or at the store with your mask on, whatever it may be. I feel like you'd find new solutions because you've been forced during this time to find new solutions to problems you never thought you would have, um, before pandemic.
So I think what I would like is to have you come back to this podcast,
Oh,
Ryan, because I
100%.
think there's so many more things
Part
we can
two and
still
part
discuss.
three.
But
Thanks.
in keeping to the name of the podcast is the 1 hour capsule podcast, and just looking at the time that we are an
Oh
hour
yeah,
and
1 hour and a
hour and,
half.
hour and a half. We probably can keep going if I don't say anything. But I would like to maybe just ask or just cover one topic, and I think it's something that we're all sort of passionate about. But I don't think I ever asked you this in reference to like the concept of the game, like playing the game, because I know you had a venture called Game On, and you have this whole idea of gamification, but also you're a gamer, and I'm a
Right.
gamer, and so Stierner is a gamer, I just wanted to get your opinion on what you think of video games. What video games do to contribute to us, or do they contribute to us? Do they poison us? Are they like harming us? But I just want to bring
Yeah.
this thought before you say anything. Is that sometimes I heard this concept because I know people who don't understand gaming that much, and this very negative sort of overview of what gaming does to our lives, and I find this. I don't say who exactly, but I had people who would discourage me from playing video games, and they would say like, "Don't do that. That's bad for you. Don't You're
Hmm.
doing it too much, and this and that." And but I don't know. I from my point of view, it's just another type of experience. And if I gotta say it, like, it's just the one thing that was very clear for me during this COVID-19 pandemic and gaming was that yes, I have been playing more games than maybe I did before, but that's granted that we were locked down in a home and we couldn't do much else outside. And so if you're a gamer and you have a console, maybe you will pick it up and spend more hours on it than before. But if there's anything that's come out that's very positive out of this whole experience, COVID-19 and video games, is that I've been playing video games and I've been connecting to people through video games, because Tierno knows this very well, that we have this like WhatsApp group that maybe we discuss later, Ryan. We can actually add you to it. But there's this specific game called Call of Duty Warzone,
Okay.
um, and it's something that it's a game that Activision, which is the company that is a gaming company, has just released, and it's a free download, multi-platform, so it means you can get in PC and PlayStation 4 and all other consoles. That kind of like just launched around the same time that the COVID-19 was declared a pandemic, and it's sort of like it just became that, like, because some of the people that we play games with are our colleagues. We work on the same floor and different. We share the space organization, so we knew each other from before. We just said like, you guys, because we were all gamers, we was like, you guys just download this game and see, maybe we can play it together, because we were already thinking we want to play stuff together before this whole thing happened. And then we started playing together, and then we've been playing this game quite a bit. We've been putting a lot of hours into it. We invested a lot of knowledge and discussion of it, but it what it became was actually not the game, but why we played the game, at least for myself, and maybe Tierno can agree to this. Like, one of the reasons why I play the game It's just so that I can have something that I can share with other people, other guys, other people who I value. And as a result, we spend quality time just talking about, this kind of same conversations. Actually, sometimes we talk about all the stuff that is happening to us. Sometimes we share personal stuff, but we sort of just have the opportunity to sit down and talk with other people, with friends, and relate on topics that are concerning us, like the whole racism topic that was still big
Mm.
right now. But certainly we were playing games, but we certainly unpacking that topic, and it just sort of became rich. And if it's anything, like, I'm gonna say, if it's very positive out of this whole experience, like, once again, I'm gonna say it is that, I was able to connect more with this group of people,
Hmm.
and so that I call that as a very positive outcome. But I don't know your thoughts, guys, about, like, it's just video game, but like for me, like, if someone is gonna tell me once again, which actually it's happened, someone has been telling me, like, you play too many video games,
In
and I was like,
childhood.
you know what, I play video games, and it has actually enriched my social experience
Hmm.
in the lack of having social experience, and it's a very positive thing, and I can demonstrate it because this is just what's happened to me, and so I can use my experience to just, like, tell people that it's not as bad as you're thinking. But yeah,
I'll let
any
Ryan
thoughts?
go. What his thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I'm new to it, and I would say I had negative perceptions of it before as like wasting time. But what I learned, so I'm learning. I'm playing Division. I have Stadia, which is the Google
Division 2?
Chromecast one. Division two, yeah, I think it's
Okay.
two.
Yeah, it is.
So I love it, and I've had the experience of playing with someone, although it got a bit stressful because he was really serious, and I'm like a lazy player. And I'm getting better at it, and I'm learning it. And he gave me, the person I played with via voice. He gave me some insights, so that was a cool experience to like just use voice. So I love like how it teaches you. Like in the beginning, I was overwhelmed, but now I'm confident. And I love how it takes you and it gives you these skills to become better. Um, but I think when it comes to what you're saying about other people making you feel inferior, or like questioning, I think that is comes down to not feeling like you need to validate yourself. If you find if you know your intention for using it, and if you're not just always using it to deflect from emotions you don't want to deal with, or deflect from problems you don't want to deal with in your life, then it's fine to use once in a while as a coping mechanism, but it should be used more as an expression of like, I really feel like doing this, and I'm not doing it for any reason that is trying to avoid anything else. I want to play, I enjoy it. And I think if you can honestly say that to yourself, you don't need to validate that to anybody. And if anybody feels like is questioning you on it, and I don't know, I feel like maybe that's a reconsideration of, is that person a good fit for your circle?
Mm.
And I think that's been my biggest thing recently, is like, especially because I'm trying to focus more on my spiritual stuff. I play more video games. You know, I live at home right now with my parents, which has been a very cool experience being older, because they don't always get everything, but I've learned to communicate with them simply because it's a matter of, I have to respect that I live at their place. But I've slowly like closed the doors, deleted the numbers, deleted social media, and got rid of people that I felt like I had to justify things that I really didn't have to justify. Or even that if I felt like I was taking up mental space, thinking I needed to justify. And so certain relationships that used to be really important are not as important to me, but not that I love the person any less. It's just we're different people, and that's okay. But if this brings me joy, and this I believe is helping for my growth, like it seems it was for you, Norman, then unless somebody can understand that, you know, it's more of an acquaintance than a friend, or it's more of like a once in a while friend than a I'm going to keep in touch friend. And I think once you start to build those and like come up with understanding, who do I want in this my circle, like who allows me to feel the best about myself, um, and grow in the way I appreciate growing, I think that's when life just becomes a lot easier. Because all that negative, dealing with that stuff that is perceived as negative, you don't have to worry about. And that doesn't mean being ignorant. It's simply
Hmm.
meaning I've already thought it through for myself, and I don't see a negative in playing more games. So I don't feel like I need to constantly justify why I'm doing that with someone.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, the reason why I'm a gamer is because it's something that I always wanted when I was a kid. all of my friends had gaming, had like consoles, either a Game Boy or an N64, Sega Genesis. So once I arrived in Canada, my goal was like, hey, I'm gonna make sure that I that I do all these things that I couldn't do as a child now. Right? Oh,
Mm.
Past
let me get these,
childhood regression.
yeah, let me get these Jordans, let me get these nice
Right.
t-shirts and whatever. And gaming was one of those. And honestly, when I started playing games, it was just to have fun. But I never imagined I could get to a point where the best stories that I've lived through were through gaming, or the
Hmm.
best, I guess, um, just connection I made with friends was through gaming. So I really value gaming, but I don't see it as a thing that I'm doing to hinder me from doing other things like working or connecting with my family or my friends. But I also value it as as a medium for me to either have fun, learn something new, experience something new, or make connections. So I'm at a point where nobody can shame me to a certain extent, except maybe my mom and my father, but to shame me to stop playing video games because I value it too much. Obviously, I always have to check myself and make sure that I'm not playing too much, or I'm not putting gaming in front of sometime eating. Right? It's like I can eat a little later, just play one more game with Norman, but that's rare to a certain extent. So to me, again, I don't see gaming as an issue. It's only an issue if it hinders me to doing stuff that I should do in my life that advance
Right.
either career or myself, my person.
It's more of a distraction than
Exactly,
a
exactly.
outlet, right?
Yeah, yeah. And since you're new to gaming, trust me, we have a list of games we want you to play. I know you don't want to focus on it, but trust me, we'll come up with a great list of
Well,
games.
I'm limited by Stadia's growth, so I
Oh,
like
that's
I like
true.
the simplicity of
That's
the
true.
Chromecast
Yeah,
and the
that's true.
cheapness of it.
Yeah.
But Division Two is already like quite a lengthy game. So,
Okay.
but I'm not to say I'm not open to it. I think it's just going to be more of a slower pace for
Oh, don't worry. I'll do my research. That's normal.
me. Nice.
Since you're a Stadia, I'll just research on Stadia.
I do miss though, like even though I played with this stranger, I would love to play with friends where we have a little bit more of a relationship. I found it hard to build a relationship with this stranger, and it wasn't the right vibe. They were a great player
Okay.
and they were a lot of fun. But yeah, I would love to play with you guys because I feel like it would just be fun to like have friends, and
Yeah,
you're
for sure.
Yeah, but that's the cool thing about
blowing.
playing as a team right now is that we really like do teamwork actually, right? It just really feels
Right.
like we're collaborating. It's like, hey, you run over there, or like you
Yeah.
mark that, or you, hey, cover me, that kind of stuff.
We
It's
definitely know our strengths and weakness, and not only that,
Right.
we do call each other out, and we're honest with each other. Which like there was no way in hell I would have been that way with someone as I see as a senior staff at work, which is Norman, and get that you know sense of like I'm comfortable to judge him on certain
Mm.
things while we play games. But yeah.
Well, and on the note, I'll just add that it's interesting what I found with shoot. I love shooting games,
Hmm.
and I know there's a lot of debate around that's does it influence people? Again, I'm sure there's studies that say it does in a negative way. It influences people, but for me, it's a great outlet because at the end of the day, those experiences that trigger certain emotions, they show up anyways. And it's not to say I would go and do something like
Oh,
that, but I find myself able to like cleanse through those emotions by using these video games and these opportunities to just like blow stuff up and like yeah. I don't know what it is, maybe it's really horrible, but I actually feel a lot like I can deal with more difficult situations because of this shooting game.
hey,
Because I
ask
feel more in
Norman what he
control of
says when he has a stressful day at work.
it, right.
Hey, let's go shoot some people in Call of Duty, and we do that and we relax.
Better than lashing out at like relationships or friends or parents, like and like
Definitely.
just being, yeah, or vomiting that negative emotion on
Hmm.
someone when
Yeah.
doesn't need to.
Great
So
space to vent. I can tell you that much. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
All right, guys. I think we're gonna uh, pause here or end here. And is there anything you wanted to announce or bring
No,
to?
thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to you both for having me on. And yeah, I love it. I love the conversation, and I look forward to the next one, whenever that might be.
Oh, that'll be soon. I learned
Awesome.
so much,
And our
and
gaming
now
fest,
for exactly.
because I know Stadia does crossplay, but I think only with computer. But let's see.
Would
Let's see.
okay.
It's still new.
No, we'll
It's
find
still new.
we'll
We'll
find a
find it.
way. Don't worry about it. We'll find.
Or we'll just meet at Norman's place once this whole
Oh
pandemic
my
thing
God,
comes
yes.
to a close.
We'll find a way. I don't know if you
For sure. All
We didn't even ask him. He was like, "You're volunteer,
yeah, he's
Norman.
like, yeah,
Sorry."
for sure.
right.
Solo del Tado. What is it again?
Lomo saltado. It's a
Lomo
dish.
saltado for everyone. There you go.
Yes, he likes that dish, the Peruvian dish,
Oh, it's
Tierna.
so
That
good, man.
Right?
you heard now from two people aside from
I'm sure your
yourself.
brother will be like, yeah, it's okay. I can do better. But
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks so much again. I appreciate it.
thanks for
All
coming in,
right.
Ryan.
All right, no problem. Take care.
Take care. Bye.